The galaxy was always busy. Ships moved between planets like ants on a giant table. Merchants shouted across trade stations. Soldiers flew in big warships. Miners worked on floating rocks. It was noisy, crowded, and full of life. But today, something strange happened. Something that made the busy galaxy stop. It started with a signal. At first, the signal was small, a whisper in the middle of 1,000 voices. The stations ignored it. The patrols ignored it. They thought it was just a broken satellite or a lost probe. But then the signal grew louder. It wasn't speaking words. It wasn't asking for help. It was just there. A long, cold sound, like a deep hum from something very, very big. Captain Relin of the Unity station was the first to notice something was wrong. He sat in his control room, sipping hot brew, when his officer shouted, "Sir, you need to see this." On the giant screen, a ship appeared. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. It was black, so black that even the stars seemed to disappear behind it. It had no flags, no colors, no symbols, just a long, smooth body floating silently near the station. "Who are they?" Captain Relin asked. No one answered. Every scanner tried to read the ship. No information, no signals, no engine readings. It was like the ship wasn't even alive. And yet, it was there. Huge, quiet, watching. The station called out on all channels. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself. You are entering neutral space. Please respond." No reply. They tried again, and again. Nothing. Captain Relin felt a chill run down his spine. He had fought in 3 wars. He had seen death up close. But this was different. This was fear, the kind that made your skin crawl and your hands shake. Across the galaxy, news spread fast. Pirates who ruled the dark corners of space suddenly disappeared from their hunting grounds. Merchants turned their ships around, heading back to their homeworlds. Even the great war fleets of the Zethran Empire and the Trigon Confederacy stopped their battles and listened. Everyone asked the same question. What is that ship? The High Council of 7 Stars called an emergency meeting. Is it a weapon? One leader shouted. Is it a lost ancient ship? Another guessed. Maybe it's a ghost. An old merchant whispered. The oldest and wisest of them all, Grand Scholar Vem, shook his head. No, he said slowly. It's human. The room fell silent. Humans. They were a mystery to the galaxy. Long ago, they had fought brutal wars, but then they disappeared. Some said they hid themselves, building stronger ships, waiting. Others believed they had destroyed themselves. No one really knew. Until now. Back at Unity Station, Captain Relin watched the black ship with nervous eyes. The ship made no move to attack. It didn't even show its weapons. It just floated there, like a shark waiting in the dark waters. The smaller ships near the station backed away, afraid. Some pilots asked permission to run. Captain Relin said nothing. He felt it too. The pull of fear, the whisper in the back of his mind telling him, run, hide. But he couldn't look away. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like a silent storm about to break. Hours passed. The ship did nothing. But the silence grew heavier, thicker. Even the stars around the station seemed to dim. It was as if the whole galaxy was holding its breath. Some tried to guess what the humans wanted. Some believed the humans had returned for revenge. Others thought they came to make peace. But no one dared to move first. Because deep inside, everyone understood one terrible truth. Whoever attacked first would not survive. And so, the galaxy froze in fear, staring into the dark, endless sky, waiting for the human ship to make its first move. The strange ship floated in space, unmoving, like a dark shadow among the stars. Its presence spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. On every planet, inside every station, across every fleet, the same whisper grew louder. Something unknown had arrived, and no one knew what it wanted. Governments called secret meetings. Military fleets stood ready but dared not get too close. Even the bold pirate clans, known for never fearing anything, pulled back their ships into hiding. At the Galactic Union headquarters, leaders from 100 worlds gathered. They argued for hours, throwing guesses into the air. Some said the ship belonged to an ancient race from the forgotten past. Others thought it was the first warning of a new power rising among the stars. But one fact stayed clear to everyone. It was human. The word human carried an old weight. Humans were known once long ago, remembered in old data records and broken histories. Stories spoke of their fierce courage, their sharp minds, and their unmatched willpower. They were builders and explorers, but also beings who would never bend, no matter the cost. Yet, humans had vanished from the galaxy for centuries. No one knew where they went. No one knew why they left. Now, seeing the black ship in the sky, many wondered, had humans been watching all along? Had they returned stronger, hidden behind walls no one could break? Questions filled every mind. But the ship gave no answers. From the mining fields of Ballora to the great cities of Kellen Prime, everything slowed. Ships stayed docked. Markets closed early. Patrols circled nervously around their home planets. The usual laughter in spaceports faded. Even the youngest cadets, who barely understood fear, grew quiet. The galaxy had faced many threats before. It had seen wars that shook whole systems. It had seen plagues, invasions, and disasters. But this was different. This was the fear of the unknown, the most powerful fear of all. In a far corner of space, a small research vessel floated quietly. A young scientist named Elin watched the mysterious ship from her tiny observation deck. Her hands trembled slightly as she took notes. She could not look away from the dark ship that hung in the sky like a sleeping giant. Elin whispered to herself, "They are not here to conquer or destroy. They are waiting for something." Her voice broke the heavy silence inside her ship. No one truly believed the humans would attack without reason. But no one wanted to be the first to test their patience either. Messages were sent to the human ship from many governments, each carefully worded. Greetings were offered. Warnings were whispered. Promises of friendship were made. Still, there was no answer. The ship floated silently, calm and unmoving. In the great halls of power, leaders worried. They wondered if they should prepare for battle or prepare for peace. Some suggested moving the fleet closer. Others shouted to stay away. Fear, not anger, controlled their hearts now. The galaxy had always believed it was strong. Its empires had ruled for generations. Its technology had reached new heights. Its armies could destroy whole worlds. But standing against one silent ship, all that strength felt small. Children looked up at the night skies, seeing nothing but stars, and wondering what secret visitor had arrived. Old veterans remembered stories about humans and whispered prayers they had not spoken in years. Merchants locked their goods away, unsure if there would even be buyers tomorrow. The very rhythm of life slowed. It was as if the galaxy itself paused to watch. And above it all, the ship remained, silent, patient, waiting. No one could guess if the humans were offering a gift, or a test, or a warning. In the hearts of the millions watching from afar, one quiet truth grew louder with every passing second. The galaxy had changed forever. And whatever happened next, nothing would ever be the same again. As days turned into weeks, the mysterious human ship continued to float silently in space. It never moved, yet it seemed to watch everything around it. The galaxy grew more nervous with each passing hour. From the biggest empires to the smallest colonies, everyone felt the pressure, the weight of the unknown. But then, something unexpected happened. One evening, just as the stars were beginning to fade into the blue of morning, a small scout ship, the Valiant, approached the human ship. It was a brave move, one that few had dared to make. The captain, Commander Darren, was known for his sharp mind and his fearless heart. He had studied humans and their strange history, and he believed there was more to the ship than met the eye. He believed the ship wasn't a threat, it was a sign. The Valiant cruised slowly toward the dark vessel, sending out waves of communication, asking for permission to approach. At first, there was silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, a low hum echoed from the human ship, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the very air. It wasn't loud, but it was deep, like the sound of thunder in the distance. Commander Darren's heart raced. This was the first sound anyone had heard from the human ship. It wasn't a message. It wasn't a warning. It was a greeting. He ordered his ship to move closer. The crew was nervous, but they trusted their commander. They passed through the eerie silence, floating toward the unknown. The Valiant moved closer and closer, its engines humming gently as it approached the dark ship. They came to a stop just a few hundred meters from its massive hull. It was like looking at a mountain that floated in space, silent and unyielding. Nothing happened. No lights flashed. No weapons powered up. The commander waited, staring at the black ship, unsure of what to do next. But then, out of nowhere, the human ship began to move. It was a small shift at first, just enough to make the crew of the Valiant hold their breath. But the movement was deliberate. The ship slowly turned, almost as if it were studying them. The tension in the Valiant's control room was thick. "What is it doing?" whispered one of the crew members. "Is it scanning us?" asked another, eyes wide with confusion. The silence felt heavier than ever before. The unknown ship seemed to be thinking. And that thought made everyone uneasy. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't leaving. It was just observing. Commander Darren felt a strange mix of relief and fear. The ship wasn't an immediate threat, but it wasn't offering any answers either. The minutes passed, stretching longer than hours. The crew waited for the ship to do something. Anything. Then, just when it seemed the moment would never end, the human ship did something unexpected. A small burst of energy shot out from its hull, so fast that it left no time for the Valiant to react. But it wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a threat. The energy shot into space and spread, like a signal being sent out. The ship had spoken. But what did it mean? The crew of the Valiant looked at one another, confused. What was the human ship trying to say? Why had it used energy in that way? Was it a warning, a challenge, or something else entirely? The crew scrambled to analyze the strange energy. What they discovered next was both puzzling and unsettling. The energy burst wasn't just a signal, it was a complex message, a code that no one had ever seen before. It took the Valiant's crew hours to decode the message. Finally, a breakthrough came. The message, though strange and incomplete, was clear enough to understand. "We are watching. Do not make the wrong choice." The crew was stunned. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't even a clear threat. But it was a warning. The message was unmistakable. The humans weren't here to destroy, but they were making one thing clear. The galaxy had a choice. And whatever that choice was, it would decide the future. The Valiant's crew reported back to their command center, shaking with disbelief. The galaxy now had a warning from the humans. It wasn't a promise of war, but it wasn't a promise of peace either. It was a choice, and no one knew how to make it. Back in the far reaches of the galaxy, rumors began to spread faster than the speed of light. Some believed the humans had come to protect the galaxy from something worse. Others feared the message was just the beginning of something much darker. But in every corner of the galaxy, one thing was certain. The human ship had made its move. And now, the galaxy had to make its decision. Days passed, and the galaxy's pulse began to shift. The message from the human ship echoed through every communication network. Governments scrambled to decode it, to understand its meaning. But the words, "We are watching. Do not make the wrong choice," seemed to hang in the air like an unanswered question. What was the choice, and who exactly was the warning for? Some leaders believed the warning was for the galaxy itself, urging them not to act rashly. Others believed it was a test, a challenge to see if the galaxy would respond correctly. But no one had an answer. Not yet. Meanwhile, a group of young explorers, led by a bold captain named Lyra, had their own theories. Lyra was no stranger to space. She had spent most of her life traveling through the unknown. She had heard the old stories about humans, tales passed down by ancient cultures and recorded in dusty data logs. These stories painted humans as strong, resilient beings, unafraid to stand up to any challenge. But what if there was more to them than the stories said? What if they had come back for a reason? Lyra's crew wasn't afraid. They were explorers, after all, and exploring the unknown was what they did best. They decided to take matters into their own hands. With a ship of their own, a small vessel called the Pioneer, they set off toward the human ship, ready to learn the truth. The journey was long, and as they neared the area where the human ship had appeared, a sense of calm took over. There was no tension, no fear, just a quiet determination to uncover the mystery. Lyra sat quietly in the captain's seat, staring at the vast emptiness of space, lost in thought. "Do you think it's a test?" one of her crew members, Ryan, asked from behind her. Lyra looked up at him. "I think it's more than a test. It's a challenge, a chance to prove something to the galaxy." Ryan nodded, but a sense of unease crept into his eyes. He knew the danger of the unknown, but he also knew the promise of discovery. As they approached the dark ship, Lyra gave the order to send out a signal. A calm, steady communication, just like the Valiant had done before. They waited and waited. For what felt like hours, there was no response. Then, just as they thought they might have been ignored, the ship moved. It was slow at first, barely noticeable, like a giant waking from a long slumber. The dark vessel turned slightly, its surface gleaming in the light of distant stars. For the first time, it felt like the ship was acknowledging their presence. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. It was as if the ship had been waiting for something. Maybe it had been waiting for them. "Prepare for communication," Lyra ordered, her voice steady. They had made contact. Now, they would see if the humans were ready to speak. A light flickered on the console, and a soft voice filled the room. It wasn't a message or a warning. It was a question. "Why do you come?" The voice was calm but firm, as if the speaker already knew the answer. Lyra hesitated for a moment. She had expected many things, but she hadn't expected this. "We come to understand," Lyra replied. "We come to learn, to speak, to see if we can understand each other." There was a pause, and for a moment, the crew of the Pioneer held their breath. The human ship seemed to consider her words carefully. Then, a simple statement came through. "You seek answers, but answers are earned." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. What did that mean? It was a challenge, just like she had fought. But this challenge wasn't about fighting or conquering. It was about something deeper. The voice continued. "Prove you are worthy of knowledge. Prove that you are ready to face what lies ahead." With that, the communication ended, and the human ship fell silent once again. Lyra looked at her crew. What were they supposed to do now? Had they passed the first test? Or was this just the beginning of something much bigger? As the Pioneer hovered in space, the weight of the moment settled on them. They had made contact, yes, but what came next was the real question. Would the galaxy rise to the challenge? Would they prove themselves worthy of the knowledge the humans offered? Time would tell. But one thing was certain. The galaxy's future was no longer in the hands of its leaders alone. It was in the hands of those who were brave enough to ask questions, to face the unknown, and to challenge themselves to grow. And in that quiet, suspended moment in space, Lyra realized something. They hadn't just come to meet the human ship, they had come to meet themselves, to see what they were truly capable of. The message from the human ship had left an impression on the galaxy, but it was also the start of something far more complex, While Lyra and her crew continued their journey to understand the humans, the rest of the galaxy watched closely, waiting to see what would happen next. The mysterious message had shaken everyone, but no one knew how to respond to a challenge that wasn't about force, but about wisdom. There were those who feared the unknown, but there were also those who saw an opportunity, a chance to prove the strength of the galaxy, not through war, but through understanding. Meanwhile, Lyra sat in her cabin, looking out at the vast expanse of space. Her mind was racing with thoughts. What did the humans want? What kind of knowledge did they hold? And how could they prove themselves worthy of it? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that this wasn't just about the humans at all. It was about the galaxy and its people. For centuries, they had looked for answers from the stars, seeking to understand the mysteries of the universe. But now, here they were, face to face with something far greater than anything they had ever imagined. It wasn't about technology or military might. It was about a challenge that required something more, something deeper. She wasn't alone in these thoughts. Her crew had been discussing the message in their free time, trying to make sense of it. Captain Lyra wasn't the only one who felt that the message was a test, but not in the way most of the galaxy thought. It wasn't about proving power or strength. It was about proving the willingness to learn, to grow, and to make the right decisions. But where to start? As the Pioneer drifted further from the human ship, Lyra knew that the galaxy had to make a choice. This wasn't something that could be solved by one ship, one crew, or even one planet. It was a question for everyone. Could the galaxy come together, not out of fear, but out of respect for the unknown? For the next few days, Lyra focused on her crew. They trained together, working on their communication skills and on understanding each other better. They weren't just preparing to meet the humans again. They were preparing to meet the galaxy itself. They had to show that they were ready to be more than just explorers. They had to show they were ready to be leaders, to inspire others to rise above their fear and face the challenge head-on. On the 5th day after receiving the message, a decision came from the Council of Galaxy Leaders. They were ready to respond, not with a fleet or weapons, but with something far more meaningful, a gathering of minds. Representatives from all corners of the galaxy would come together in a peaceful council to discuss the next steps. The message from the human ship had shown that true strength came from wisdom, and now it was time for the galaxy to prove they had the wisdom to move forward together. As Lyra and her crew prepared for the council meeting, the Pioneer traveled to the central hub of the galaxy, a massive space station that was home to diplomats, scientists, and thinkers from every species. This would be the place where the most important conversation in the galaxy's history would take place. When they arrived, the station was buzzing with activity. Lyra and her crew were welcomed by representatives from the most powerful factions in the galaxy, each eager to learn what the human ship meant and what they should do next. The leaders from the different worlds were nervous, uncertain about what would come of this meeting. But Lyra felt something different, a sense of hope. For the first time, it seemed as though the galaxy was ready to listen, to learn from one another, to work together for a common cause. The meeting began with a silence that was almost deafening. One by one, the leaders spoke, each sharing their thoughts on what the human message meant. Some suggested sending scouts to the human ship again. Others called for more data to be gathered. But there was one voice that stood out from the rest. It came from an old scientist named Zurek, a being who had seen centuries of peace and war, and who had always believed in the importance of understanding. Zurek spoke calmly but firmly. "We have been afraid of what we do not know for far too long. We fear what we cannot control. But this is not a moment to act from fear. It is a moment to show the galaxy that we can choose differently, through knowledge, respect, and unity." His words resonated with Lyra, and with many others in the room. It was a call for a different kind of strength. Not the strength to fight, but the strength to listen. The strength to face the unknown, not with fear, but with curiosity and an open heart. For the first time, Lyra felt that the galaxy wasn't just reacting to the human message. They were shaping their own future. They weren't being pushed into a corner by the unknown. Instead, they were standing tall, ready to meet whatever came next with courage, wisdom, and unity. As the council discussions continued, it became clear that the decision would not be easy. There were still those who feared the unknown and wanted to prepare for the worst. But there were also those who believed, like Lyra, that the time had come for the galaxy to make a choice, one that wasn't born from fear, but from the desire to grow and learn. In the days that followed, a plan was put into motion. The galaxy's leaders would send a peaceful delegation to the human ship, not to confront them, but to ask questions, to seek answers, to understand the challenge they had been given. The galaxy was not going to react with violence, nor with submission. They would react with the one thing they had always been known for, their ability to choose wisely, to learn, and to grow together. And so the preparations began. The day of departure had finally arrived. Lyra stood on the bridge of the Pioneer, looking out at the massive space station in front of her. She could see the different ships gathering in the distance, preparing for the journey ahead. It was not just her crew anymore. It was a united front, a coalition of worlds coming together to face the unknown. For the first time, Lyra felt a sense of purpose greater than anything she had ever experienced. This wasn't about proving strength or dominance. It was about proving something far more important, the ability to come together as one. The galaxy had spent centuries fighting its own battles, divided by different species, cultures, and beliefs. But now, it seemed as if something had changed. The human message had sparked a fire of unity in a way nothing else had before. Lyra knew that this mission was a test not only for the humans but for the entire galaxy. Would they be able to put aside their differences and work together? Or would old habits of mistrust and division tear them apart? As the Pioneer moved away from the station, Lyra could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She was leading a crew, yes, but she was also leading a mission that had the potential to change everything. The galaxy's response to the human ship would set the tone for the future, one where peace could be a reality, or one where fear would continue to rule. She had always believed that exploration was about more than just discovering new places. It was about discovering new ways of thinking, new ways of connecting with others. But now the stakes were higher than ever before. The delegation, composed of representatives from various species, was traveling in several ships, each designed for peace and communication, not war. There were diplomats, scientists, and even philosophers aboard, all eager to meet the human crew and learn what they had to offer. Each member of the delegation had a different perspective, but they all shared one thing in common: the belief that this was an opportunity to create something new. Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her communication console buzzing. It was Zarek, the wise scientist from the galaxy's council. "Captain, we are approaching the coordinates of the human ship. We are on track to meet them in 1 hour." Lyra nodded, her heart racing. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. As the ships neared the coordinates, Lyra gathered her crew on the bridge. She looked at each of them, seeing the mix of excitement and anxiety in their eyes. "We've trained for this," she said, her voice steady. "We've prepared ourselves for every possibility. But remember, this is not a battle. This is an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity for all of us to grow." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that she could see resonated with her crew. They were ready. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they were ready. The human ship appeared on the sensors just ahead, like a dark shadow against the stars. It was still as silent and imposing as it had been when it first appeared in the galaxy. Lyra took a deep breath, giving the order to slow down. One by one, the ships of the delegation began to position themselves around the human ship, maintaining a safe distance. Then a signal came through from the human ship, a single line of communication. "Welcome, travelers. We have been waiting." The voice was calm and inviting, yet there was an underlying depth to it, as though it held knowledge far beyond anything they could imagine. Lyra's crew exchanged nervous glances. What did this mean? Were they truly ready for what lay beyond that simple message? "We will approach slowly," Lyra instructed. She could feel the weight of her words, knowing that this was a defining moment. She wasn't just leading her crew anymore. She was leading the galaxy itself toward a new path. As the ships moved closer, the human ship's presence seemed to grow. It wasn't a physical force, but something far more subtle, a feeling of being watched, of being acknowledged by something ancient and powerful. There was no fear, only a deep sense of respect for whatever force had created this ship. The delegation's ships hovered near, waiting for the next step. But nothing moved. Nothing happened. Then suddenly, the human ship's surface shimmered, and a doorway opened, a glowing, translucent portal in the heart of the ship. It was an invitation to step into the unknown. The silence was almost unbearable as Lyra and her crew exchanged looks. This was it. There was no turning back now. They had been chosen, not by force, but by something far more powerful. The human ship had reached out to them, and now they had the chance to walk through that portal and face whatever awaited them on the other side. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling her pulse quicken. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was the beginning of a new chapter for the galaxy, and it would be up to them to decide what kind of story it would become. With a steady hand, she gave the order to approach the portal. The Pioneer moved forward, guided by the light that emanated from the human ship. As they crossed the threshold, Lyra couldn't help but wonder. What would they find on the other side? What kind of knowledge, what kind of wisdom awaited them in this mysterious new world? The galaxy had never faced anything like this before, but perhaps that was exactly what it needed.